This channel is called The Geek in Review, and yeah, hey, I usually do review stuff, but I have thoughts on other things as well, and I'd like to share them. So as always, I'm Al, this is The Geek in Review, and I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on what the Mandalorian and Grogu problem is, and what the general Star Wars problem is. Because in case you didn't know, and you might not know, and I'll get to that in a minute in the video, there's a new Star Wars film out this week, The Mandalorian and Grogu. In fact, it's the first Star Wars film in over half a decade. 7 years, in fact, based on a show that helped Disney launch their own streaming platform. That became a huge cultural hit and, more importantly, sold a ton of merchandise due to this guy. So, the Mandalorian and Grogu film should be a solid box office and cultural hit. Let's look at the facts. It's part of a huge franchise with a huge fan base based on a huge show with a fan base actually spanning several generations going back to the 70s up until the present day. But the early reviews for this film are out, and not only are people not talking about The Mandalorian and Grogu, when they are talking about it, they're either saying that it's fun or it's pretty flat for a Star Wars film. So at the time of recording this video, the Rotten Tomato scores on this are about 60%, based on about 50 reviews. Now that is going to change and it is going to go up and down, and the fan score is going to come out and, you know, let me know about that later on in the comments. But my point is, I've lived through two of the three big Star Wars phenomenons. I was a kid in '99 when The Phantom Menace came out, and an adult in 2015 when The Force Awakens came out. And let me tell you, and I probably don't need to, by the way, because the metrics of the people who watch this channel, you're probably there for both of these events, if not one of them. The hype was huge. In fact, the year leading up to these films coming out, 98 and 2014, the Star Wars hype was everywhere, and I mean everywhere. It didn't dominate the cultural landscape for geeks, it was the cultural landscape, well, apart from 99 when The Matrix came out the same year and The Phantom Menace pretty much fell flat critically, but that's for another video. But my point is, the early reviews for this aren't bad, they're just not great. And this is a Star Wars film, based on a hit show, well, until season 3, that's where The Mandalorian dropped off, let's be honest, I'm going to get to that in a second. And while I don't think this film is going to be bad, at least from what these reviews are saying at this point, it could be worse. It could just be bland. Now, I don't talk much about Star Wars on this channel because if you aren't aware, it's a bit of a divided fan base and an internet cesspool. Much like Star Trek, and like Star Trek as well, I really feel that this franchise has lost its cultural relevance because it's lost the goodwill of the audience. I mean, there's always going to be hardcore Star Wars fans, and the first two seasons of The Mandalorian were great. Cinematic TV, new characters doing new things from a new perspective. But then at the end of season 2, they introduced Luke, who, let's be honest, is the point of view character for the first 3 films. And pretty much the first person you think of when you hear the word Jedi, because, you know, he was the Jedi in Return of the Jedi. And a literal pop culture icon on top of that, and quite rightly so. But my point is, up until he showed up, this show stood on its own 2 feet. Yeah, it was set in the same universe or galaxy of these characters, but it wasn't tied to the first 3 films. It managed to create something new, but make it feel like something that we all felt like Star Wars should be. It did have some references, but not overly so, or not anything in the way that Star Trek had, where it completely, like, you know, was just swamped by references and Easter eggs and everything else. I mean, The Mandalorian was a show that non-Star Wars fans could watch and enjoy because it wasn't tied to the existing films or the existing things in the franchise. And that kind of all changed after they brought Luke Skywalker in season 3, because it began to get more tied to stuff that had happened in the Clone Wars cartoon and not everyone had watched that show, stuff that had happened in Rebels and not everyone watched that show, and you know, you get the general idea. So I think season 2 bringing in Luke might have ruined it, or maybe The Mandalorian was at its peak. I don't really know. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And also, another complaint about Star Wars generally, when it does sort of tie into itself, at least in the live action stuff, it seems to rely on the same characters and references over and over again. Like, are there only 20 interesting people in this galaxy who actually do stuff? After a pretty dismal closure to the sequel trilogy and the mixed reviews of the Star Wars shows that we've gotten in the last 7 years or so, Disney can't really afford to be putting out a mid-product. And you know, what do I mean by that? Well, here's an example. Imagine there's a new bar or restaurant opened in the town or the area that you live in. You haven't gone to it, but you know someone has. You ask them, hey, what's that place like? And they go, it's okay. So, you know, on that, you're not really going to go out of your way to go there. In fact, you're probably going to forget about any thoughts you ever had of going there. And I think that's where Star Wars is at as a franchise at the moment. It's not great, but it's not bad. It's been around for so long that we all accept it's still there. And this should be a money-making machine, and to be fair, it probably is in terms of merchandise, but I'm talking about the movies. Because if you're a hardcore Star Wars fan, in the last 10, 11 years, you've had it rough when it comes to the films. Now, the shows, sure, there's probably been ones that you've loved, others that you just didn't care about or connect with, and some that you actually hated. But going back to what I said earlier, Star Wars for decades was an event. We had 3 movies, then nothing. 3 more movies, years later, then nothing. And since 2015, we've pretty much had too much, and that's caused the quality to dip, the fan base to be so-so and super divided, and a tsunami of online hatred towards the producers and creatives behind this franchise, which, to be fair, I don't really like personal attacks on people. I don't think they're ever warranted, so if that's your style, you can just fuck off right now. And this is sad, because if you told me as a kid we were going to get this much Star Wars content all the time, I would never have believed you. And I think there's just too much that we don't need, and Disney didn't really pick a direction that it wanted to go in. I think Disney did realise this recently, and they've definitely, the last 2 or 3 years, dialed down the production of shows due to oversaturation, mixed reception, and mixed quality. They've also done the same for Marvel, because it's pretty much had the same issue, but again, that's for another video. But going back to the Mandalorian and Grogu reviews, I think if this film had come out in 2023, there would actually be so much more hype and online presence about it. Because I'm checking Twitter just now and all I'm seeing is meh, to be honest. And that's not going to put bums on seats when it comes to going to the cinema. And I don't think in 2 months' time we're going to be talking about this film. It's certainly not going to break any box office records, as at the moment the weekend predictions are 80 to 100 million, which is amazing if this wasn't based on a hit show that became a shit show and a former cinema juggernaut. And the point of all this, at least my point, because it's my video that you're watching, subscribe and leave a like by the way, you can't have too much of a good thing. You can have too much of a bland thing, and for the first time since I've been old enough to go to the cinema, this might be the first Star Wars film I don't actually pay to watch in the cinema. But as always, these are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you actually going to pay to watch this film? Are you going to wait for the reviews to come out? Are you going to wait till it goes on streaming? I'm really interested to see what you think. Also, where do you think the Mandalorian show dropped off, if it did drop off? Because there's very mixed reviews about that. Going back and watching it, the episodes look great, but from season 2 to season 3, the story really does take a drop, and then we've got the whole Boba Fett thing as well, but let's not get into that. So if you made it this far and you haven't done it already, subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, and my name's Al, thanks for watching.